Too late. No time, it's over now. Can't wait. Now. It's too late. No time, it's over now. Can't wait. And now we all fall down into the fire, and my wishes have all come true. We all fall down. I don't want it if I can't be with you.
Hello everyone, I am Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. So recently I've been doing a lot of tag videos. I did a couple, and I've just been seeing a lot of different tags floating around, so I thought it would be fun to try and do one myself. So this is the Gothic Horror tag, because Gothic Horror is my absolute favorite subgenre of horror. I love Gothic pretty much anything, and I didn't see any kind of tag for this floating around on the internet, so I thought I would just do it myself. I'm gonna answer the tag questions myself, and then I'm gonna tag a few people. What defines a horror film or story as Gothic in your eyes? What sets it apart from other styles of horror? To me, what makes horror Gothic is not easy to define. It's not easy for a lot of people. I got a book on the Gothic in film a long time ago. Its definition is really broad. A little too broad for me, honestly, because it's finding ways to make cases for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre being a Gothic film, for Shaun of the Dead being a Gothic film, for Twilight being Gothic. I don't care if it has vampires and werewolves in it. That's not... no. Stop. In my eyes, what makes something Gothic is it has this specific atmosphere to it. It's very eerie and romanticized. It probably has a lot of these traditional tropes to it, like crumbling castles or old mansions, maybe a supernatural element, although that's not necessary. Everything should be a little bit surreal, a little bit beyond reality, and sort of romanticized, and it should be using this stylized setting to convey angst, basically, because that is what is associated with Gothic in Gothic literature and in film as well, in my eyes. It's using sort of these tropes in these romanticized settings to convey the angst and the torment of the characters. That's what makes something Gothic in my eyes, but that's not the absolute definition. You get to decide your own terms on this. If you were forced to pick, what would you say is your favorite Gothic horror film? I'm gonna be easy on myself again and pick my default answer, which is also what I chose back when I did Horror and Taj's contest, where the question was, what is your favorite horror film? And that is the original 1922 Nosferatu. This is a bootleg version of Dracula, directed by F.W. Murnau and starring Max Schreck as Count Orlok, he's Count Dracula. This movie is very, very reliant on this sort of strange atmosphere that is created. It uses what effects were there at the time. You really need to watch it with the frames tinted in different colors, though, because there's a lot of like day for night photography, and it'll be tinted blue to show that it's nighttime. But there's stop motion and sort of time-lapse stuff that makes things open by themselves or move really fast. Things will appear and disappear. There's double exposures where things will fade in and out or be transparent. Shadows will move of their own accord, or at least Count Orlok's does. It's just got this very strange and haunting atmosphere to it, and it's basically just stripped the Dracula story down to its bare essentials, and just this fear of death, fear of this blood-drinking creature that's going to spread this plague and kill everyone. It's not romantic or sexual, really. It's just bloodthirsty killer with this nightmare quality that's gonna come and kill everybody. My favorite Gothic horror film of all time, if I was forced to pick, and please don't force me because I love way too many, would be Nosferatu. What is your favorite film adaptation of a piece of Gothic literature? Do you think it does the book justice? My answer for that would still be Nosferatu, but I'm gonna pick something different just for variety's sake, and I'm gonna pick one of my other absolute favorite silent horror movies, which is I believe 1925 is when it came out, Phantom of the Opera from Universal, starring Lon Chaney, whose beautiful face you can see here, as the titular Phantom. I brought up this huge 50 horror movies box set because I wanted you to see Lon Chaney's wonderful face. I actually have a much better copy of this that was recorded off of the TV on Turner Classic Movies. The version that is in this box set is actually not that good, and the print of Nosferatu in here is garbage. Still, I really like this box set, and Phantom of the Opera is an amazing movie. It's a silent movie, so it's not gonna have actual music, but the scores that have been put with it are really beautiful, and it's just this very lavish and romantic movie. Juxtaposed with that is this really amazing horrific makeup that Lon Chaney created himself, and sort of the demented aspect of the Phantom along with the tragic element. I definitely think that this movie does the book justice. I haven't read through the original Gaston Leroux version of the Phantom all the way, but I know what happens. This movie really does capture the events that happen and the atmosphere of the opera house. Even though the events are out of order from where they happen in the book, it still captures those very effectively and accurately. It does capture the tragic, lonely, romantic aspect of Eric the Phantom, as well as his mad genius and his insanity. It doesn't have the same ending as the book, even though it was sort of supposed to, because the studio was like, no, he needs to be punished. So there's probably the first instance of a angry mob in a Universal monster movie. It's actually pretty cool, but it wasn't really what the book had. So I don't think it does the book justice in that respect, but in every other respect, I think it absolutely does. So my favorite Gothic horror film based on a book besides Nosferatu is the silent Phantom of the Opera. What is your favorite original Gothic horror film? What is one that is not based on a book? And for this, I'm gonna be jumping ahead many years to Guillermo del Toro's amazing Crimson Peak. This movie is gorgeous. It is a masterpiece, and it's an original story concocted by Del Toro himself. And let's see, I bet he worked with another screenwriter as well. Yep, written by Guillermo del Toro and Matthew Robbins. So it is an original story, and it's about this woman who falls in love and marries this man who has this huge mansion that's built on top of these clay mines with this red clay that permeates the house, and she leaves and goes there, and she's sort of seeing ghosts and premonitions telling her to beware Crimson Peak, and she doesn't know exactly what that means. She winds up at this house, and things just sort of gradually get more and more sinister. It's just beautiful. This has a lot of Guillermo del Toro's what he calls eye protein, so it's a very beautifully designed movie, but everything has a symbolic significance behind it. There's like a moth and a butterfly motif, a motif with the color red. Everything has this amazing intent behind it. The ghosts look amazing. They're practical with just a touch of CGI to make them more supernatural, and it is just a perfect Gothic horror tale. Even though Del Toro says this is more Gothic romance, it gets pretty brutal almost from the get-go. This is an amazing movie. I highly recommend it to anybody who hasn't seen it, and it is by far my favorite Gothic horror film that is not based on a piece of Gothic literature. What is your favorite monster in a Gothic horror film? You know, this is getting repetitive, because it would be Dracula, upon which Nosferatu is based and his many incarnations. But again, to not repeat myself, I am going to have to go with, no, not this guy. I love you, Lugosi, but I am actually going to be going with Dracula's Daughter from 1936. This is an amazing, amazing movie. It follows the Countess Maria Zaleska, as played by Gloria Holden. She is evidently Dracula's daughter. I don't know if this means actual reproduced baby, but as far as I know, my interpretation is that this is someone that he has bitten and has sort of taken in as a daughter figure, rather than actually being a genetic daughter, because I don't think that's how that works when you're a corpse. But we're not going into the science of vampire reproduction, because that's not what this video is about, and I don't want to talk about that. Gloria Holden as Dracula's daughter is a very different character from Count Dracula. We first get introduced to her where she is actually burning the body of her father and trying to purge herself of this vampiric influence in that way. And throughout the movie, she's trying to fight her vampiric instincts and failing. She's trying to find a cure, but she inevitably ends up succumbing and killing people. I love this sort of tragic vampire character, and it's amazingly played by Gloria Holden, especially because she didn't really want to be in a horror movie, which makes the reluctance almost more genuine, which I think is really cool. I'm also writing my own little novella based on Dracula's Daughter and the character of Lily, who is one of her victims, and what would happen if she became a vampire and had her own little adventure. So have no idea what's going to happen with that, but been having a lot of fun writing it, so hopefully I can share it with you guys sometime. But that's a story for another day. Dracula's Daughter is an amazing movie. I actually love all of the Universal Dracula movies, but that might be my favorite. It's very neck and neck with the original Lugosi movie. That is, barring Count Dracula, my favorite monster in a Gothic horror film. What is your favorite Gothic horror film without monsters, save the human ones? No ghosts or vampires or werewolves or anything supernatural for this. No reanimated corpses, no demons, nothing like that. Just people. For this, I went to the master of people gone insane, Gothic horror stories, which is Edgar Allan Poe, paired with Roger Corman and Vincent Price. It could be any of these three movies, but I went with The Pit and the Pendulum. This is an amazing adaptation of the Poe story. There really isn't that much to go on in the Poe story except this character strapped to this torture device and trying to make his escape, but it creates this whole atmosphere of obsession and these characters gradually breaking down. It just sort of gets to the evil of the human psyche, and it's done in a way that is very dark but also campy in a lot of ways because it's a Roger Corman movie and Vincent Price is being his wonderful self. So my favorite Gothic horror movie with human monsters rather than supernatural ones would be The Pit and the Pendulum. Favorite Gothic horror movie soundtrack, and this is hard for me because movie soundtracks are one of my favorite things. So I could pick, any number of Danny Elfman soundtracks, Sleepy Hollow being a major one. I could pick the soundtrack from Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is beautiful. But I had to go with Goblin's soundtrack for Suspiria. This is not the Suspiria soundtrack. This is a compilation album by Claudio Simonetti's Goblin, which is Claudio Simonetti's later band. They performed the entirety of the Suspiria soundtrack live with the movie, and I went to go see them, and I got to meet Claudio Simonetti and the guys, and they signed this CD for me, and it was really nice. I didn't get to talk to them that much, but I got a picture with him and got my CD signed, and it was really fun. The soundtrack for Suspiria really establishes a lot of the Gothic atmosphere of the movie. You've got the beautiful color scheme and the witchy supernatural stuff happening, but really what makes Suspiria is the soundtrack in my eyes. It's got this eerie, folky element and this sort of delicate aspect, but also the synths and the prog rock element, and it's just very odd. It doesn't fit in any kind of genre, and it perfectly encapsulates sort of the weird dreamlike atmosphere of Suspiria. And I love every Goblin soundtrack I've heard, but Suspiria was the first I heard, and as soon as I heard the main theme, I was in love with it. So my favorite Gothic horror movie soundtrack would have to be Goblin's soundtrack for Suspiria. Finally, what is your favorite Gothic horror story in a form other than film? This could take the form of a book, music, a video game, anything goes. I could definitely pick a book. I could pick Dracula and be generic. I could pick Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla. I could pick Frankenstein, Phantom of the Opera. I could pick any number of Poe or Lovecraft stories. I feel like I'd be repeating myself, and I'm also a huge music nerd, especially when it comes to goth rock and heavy metal. So I picked the album Damnation and a Day by Cradle of Filth. Cradle of Filth is a British gothic symphonic black metal band. They're known for these sort of lush symphonic aspects as well as Danny Filth's unbelievably high-pitched screeches, but this album is amazing. It tells the stories of the life and times of Lucifer, essentially. His time in heaven, his being cast out, and his sort of bringing evil across the earth. And it does it in this very bombastic way with an actual orchestra and a choir behind the metal band and narration, and the lyrics really do read like some kind of gothic poetry. There's lots of really clever wordplay and lots of references to different elements of art and culture. There's a lot to take in with this, and for some people it might be sort of information overload or an assault on the senses, which I can understand because it's extreme metal and it's very insane. But this album is amazing, and I highly recommend it if you're into metal and if you're into the dark side of culture in any way. Those are my answers for my Gothic horror tag, so I'm gonna tag a few people. If you don't have time to do this, or you're busy, or for whatever reason you don't want to do this or can't do this, that is all well and good, but I do hope that you consider doing this tag. So I'm going to tag Queenie Todd. I know they love their Gothic horror, especially werewolves. Sean Urshan, I know he loves his vampires and his hammer horror. Ross over at Random Horror, he likes horror stuff all across the board, but I'm sure he'd have some great answers for Gothic horror. And I'm going to tag Mark of Horror. He is very much an expert on all things horror, especially a lot of the classic stuff, so I know he'd have some great answers for this tag as well. I'm also going to tag anybody else who wants to do this tag. This is completely open to absolutely everyone. I hope the people who I have tagged are interested in doing this. I hope you have some fun with this tag and you enjoy it. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I'll see you in another one. Bye.
There's a lesson that we learn in the pages that we burn. It's written in the ashes of the fire below. All the world is spinning round as we crash into the ground. We'll never be together now. It's too late.